Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what is up, down, and sideways? It is League on Lock. Mark and Eric here with you guys. We are looking today at the 5 best players in the history of the LCS of North America. And the biggest rule for this list we got to talk about is when we say best players in the history of the LCS, that includes imports. So yeah, there's going to be some imports on this list.
You couldn't do this list for North America without allowing imports into this top 5, talking about them and the contributions that they have made to the North American scene.
Yep.
It is no secret that we have definitely utilized, and sometimes not to the exact correct measure, but the problems, and actually not the problem here, the solutions are these imports that we're going to be talking about alongside some domestic players. This is the top 5 players in the LCS's history. And you know what? We've actually had a pretty good handful of players come through and play and make their contributions to the scene, let alone individually with their play or with their personality. And as much as people like to meme on it, this is the 4 fun region, and we start with fun.
Today it's the 5 fun region as we go down 5. But before we get to the main list, got to talk about some of the guys who just came a little bit short, the honorable mentions, if you will. There's quite a few you could talk about just outside that top 5. I got Pobelter, Wild Turtle, guys who have been around for a long time, Meteos, Impact, one of those imports who's been around since 2014 now, and the big one for me, and probably the closest to being on this list, is Afromoo. Probably been the best support when you're talking about non-import in North America, because he's been around since Season 3.
He's been around forever, and yes, the last 2 seasons, you might be looking at and saying that the quality has dropped off. This is not the same Afromoo as the performances that you would be thinking of. But when you think back to those splits, maybe the first couple of splits in North America, and you're looking back to even as just far back as the time with 100 Thieves,
He got MVP
there are
one year.
some plays. Right, there are some big plays coming through from Afromoo, and this has been someone who has consistently contributed to the North American League of Legends scene and has been there for some of the highest highs that this region has ever reached.
Yeah, I mean, getting to an MSI finals with CLG, even when Doublelift left the team, it was like, well, was Doublelift just making Afro look better than he actually is? But Afro ended up making Stixxay look better than he actually is throughout a lot of 2016, so that only added to his career. Maybe if he stayed at that higher level throughout 2019, you might even talk about him cracking that top 5, but for now, he is just outside of it. And the first man on our list is someone else who's been around since Season 3. Early on in his career, he was just the forgotten about member of that stacked Cloud9 roster, but as Sneaky stayed on Cloud9 for years and years after High and Meteos were off the team, you really saw that he was one of the most consistent, not just AD carries, but players in all of North America, and has perennially been a top 3 AD carry pretty much since Season 4.
New fans to the scene only know of Sneaky because of his Patreon, and that is an absolute shame, because not to put anything away from his Patreon, it's fantastic stuff, but I gotta be saying, when you've talked about Sneaky's career, you would be remiss to be not be mentioning all the success that he has had on the Rift. He has had a phenomenal career in North America, and this is one that I don't think it should be over by any means. I think that we can still see Sneaky jump into the competitive scene. But when you look at the accomplishments that he has put in his time at the big stage for the LCS, certainly got to be one of the top 5 names that you're talking about in the scene.
Season 3 to Season 9. Every single World Championship he was attending, and more often than not, he was getting out of the group stage. And as this list goes on, we're going to talk about potentially international disappointments, but most times, save for towards the end of his tenure on Cloud9, Sneaky played even better internationally. There might have been times within the North America bubble where you were saying, oh, he's kind of slumping a bit. He's maybe almost falling outside of that top 3. But as soon as Worlds came around, you saw him playing at a higher level than you would the entire year.
He was a featured carry for Cloud9 for so many years and was always able to be there for them and be there to dish out the damage when they needed it in those team fights. Sneaky has that personality outside of League that everybody loves, and then within the team culture, he certainly was providing a lot for Cloud9.
Yeah, and early on, season 3, when he was playing with Lemon, it was just, he was Ash Zyra duty. He's a CC bot, while Meteos High and Balls are the featured carries of Cloud9. It was just so interesting to see his career kind of switch around. And then in the middle of it, he was the featured guy on Cloud9. Then he was kind of taking a backseat to Jensen. But he really went through a lot of different metas. And even when you're playing Victors or Heimerdingers in the bot lane, he played them to varying levels of success, but pretty much every meta he has stood tall.
And that's something that you got to give credit to Sneaky for, is that he's always been enthusiastic to try different playstyles or to pick up new champions. That's something that he's always prided himself on. How did he get that pocket pick Jhin? Playing that champion on release and playing it so well later on professionally. You know, I always got love for my boys playing Jhin, and Sneaky is one of the damn finest.
Yeah, there's a lot of highlights from a lot of different champions that he's played throughout his career. Coming in at number 4 is a teammate of Sneaky's for a very long time. We're talking about Jensen. We just alluded to him, and people might want Sneaky ahead of Jensen. He played a couple of years longer than him. Jensen, then Incarnation came around season 5 for that summer split. But ever since that first split, when you saw the quick development of him as a player, he has pretty much been consensus right up there with Bjergsen as one of the best. That 1-2 punch for mid laners in North America, and we're going on 5 years now that we've been talking about that.
Yeah, half a decade of that level of dominance in the North American scene, just being those two at the top. When you think of the absolute best mid laners that we had in the region, he was always there and always delivering those performances. People like to meme on the Echo R button and things of that nature, but when you're talking about it, this is one of those guys that gets you to the very first place. Why you're in those situations, why you're able to get to those championships, those pressure moments. He's a big reason why you've gotten there. And if I had to count all the times that Jensen has come up clutch, has done his job internationally at these big events, and you're looking at the times that he hasn't, I think that it outweighs him.
Yeah, and you might talk about the World's performance 2019. He was one of the weaker points for Team Liquid, but you're absolutely right. You look at previous runs of Cloud9 getting to the quarterfinals almost every time, even the 3-0 start at 2015 Worlds, even though they collapsed completely after that. But a lot of the times that Cloud9 were going on these deep runs, it was Jensen playing at an even higher level. I know we just praised Sneaky for stepping up internationally, but Jensen absolutely had a huge part in all of the success that Cloud9 has had. Now he finally gets a couple of LCS titles since he joined Team Liquid in 2019. And Jensen, yeah, you talk about the memes of the R button and the Zhonya's not being pressed, but that shouldn't take away the fact that in that series of finals against Bjergsen, he was winning a lot of those lane matchups against Bjergsen.
Right, and even in that game, he is the one winning that matchup and is the reason why Cloud9 is even in that fight at that point of the game. There's a lot of things you can talk about with that in a lot of situations. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about Jensen, you got to realize that he has been one of the best mid laners and one of the best players that we have seen in the North American region.
And talk about, I mean, you talk about pre-playing career. He had the band issues where he was supposed to be perma-banned and then he gets unbanned.
Reformed.
He's coaching for SK. It was a pretty big risk for Cloud9 to sign him at that point, especially to fill the shoes of High, who was one of the best mid laners in North America. And by the way, he's not on the top 5 of this list, is High, but he is a pioneer in North American League of Legends. And if there's a Hall of Fame, he'll be there. But he's not on top 5. Anyways, back to Jensen. He had a lot of hype and expectations, and maybe the first half of his first split, he didn't live up to them. But ever since then, for the amount of hype that this guy had, he's still delivered on it.
And the pressure was there for him to deliver on the hype once again when he moved on from Cloud9 to Team Liquid. And look, there were a lot of doubters, a lot of haters saying that yeah, he's only going to win a championship because he's on Team Liquid type of situation. That's not what we saw. His performance, his play. Exactly. His play was a big reason why they were able to go on to win so many championships. He was a big addition for Team Liquid. There's no denying that.
Another big reason Team Liquid won 4 splits in a row is the jungler that was there for all of them, Xmithy, and for coming in at number 3 on this list for us. This guy sure gets a lot of criticism and a lot of flack for multiple teams that he's been on, but he has 6 championships in the LCS, and he has been to Worlds with 4 different teams. He went there with Vulcan / XD, GG. I think they were Vulcan still Season 3. He went with CLG, Immortals, and Team Liquid. All he does is win on whatever team he's on, and people, sure, maybe he doesn't perform to the highest level against some other world-class junglers, but I think it's overrated how badly people have said he's performed on the big stage.
It's crazy because especially when you're looking at the record that he's been able to put up in North America and domestically, the success that he's been able to have, the plays that he's able to put off, there's no indication that doesn't translate on the international stage. And yes, there have been poor performances. There's been times where he's been completely outplayed. But when you do look at the entirety, and I want to say the entirety of Xmithie's career, because it's an incredibly long one filled with a lot of highs, and the lot of highs there are mainly from his performance, the impact that he has been making in the jungle on those lanes. You cannot deny the absolute power that Xmithie has been in the North American scene, and whoever's had him, and when you're playing against him, that is an absolute, really one of the icons in the North American scene.
Yeah, and longevity is absolutely one of the key factors you're looking at when you're making lists like this, being around since Season 3. And that 3rd season was when it was all about Meteos. He's the best player at NA. He's the best jungler in North America. And Meteos probably was throughout Season 4. Probably not around Season 5, but Xmithie, so many years later, we're still talking about him towards that top of the table in North America, and he's the one who's had international success, making 2 MSI finals, and that whole run with CLG in 2016, he was not a liability in the jungle against world-class junglers in MLXG and Blank on SKT. Remember when Blank was good, Mark? Good times.
Oh, I mean, it feels a long time ago. When you're
it was
thinking,
a long time ago.
Hey, but long time ago doesn't matter. Short time ago doesn't matter. Anytime you want to be looking at, Xmithie has been consistently performing in North America. And look, it doesn't matter if you're going to be calling him Xmissy or Xmithie when you're hitting those Baron smites in Twitch chat. Anytime you're a jungler that's been around as long as this, you're going to be on both sides of that coin. But I would always take the coin flip if it's going to be Xmithie, because more times than not, it's going to be coming up a victory for you.
And, he has that similar reputation as Jensen with the Echo R, the Sejuani ults for Xmithie, which always triggers me a little because he's actually really good at Sejuani. He had a little stretch where he had some pretty big whiffs, I can only think misclicks of how bad the ultis were, but 9 games out of 10, he's playing a pretty fantastic Sejuani game.
He's no Yankos on Sejuani, but he has played pretty darn good Sejuanis for sure. And as you're right, it seems like misclicks when you're seeing some of those ults whiff, because man, they've been pretty bad.
Yeah, they've been very bad. But that mid jungle duo, number 4 and 3, makes you question, boy, shouldn't Team Liquid have done a little bit better at the 2019 World Championship if they had some of the best players? But it's best not to look back at the history when it comes to World Championships for North America. We reached the top 2 now, and before you look at any names on this list, I think you know who the top 2 are going to be. Maybe you want to have some debate on what the order is, but the last couple of years have definitely swayed it a certain way. Number 2 is Bjergsen, the MVP, the Burger King of NA, and you talk about hype and shoes to fill for Jensen when he came over to Cloud9. Bjergsen, I mean, his first stream when he comes to TSM, he immediately gets 70,000 viewers. He's replacing Reginald, the owner of TSM. I think it's safe to say that 4 MVPs and 5 LCS titles, he lived up to the hype.
It's insane because the ask for Bjergsen was incredibly high at the very beginning of his career. You got to come over to another country, another continent, and you got to play League of Legends on stage here with new teammates, and you got to be taken over for Reginald, one of the most storied players in not only the game at this point, but the North American scene here. And what we got
at 17 years old.
Right, and absolutely delivered from day one. Bjergsen has been the absolute pinnacle peak of what you want from an import coming over. He ain't an import anymore. Nope. Grandfathered in. We got him claimed as domestic. We're all good here, taking in all those performances. Yes, there is some criticisms that can be put obviously towards him from the past couple of years. And even when things were going really well for TSM, you could put those criticisms there. But there is absolutely no denying that Bjergsen is without a doubt the best mid laner that we've ever seen in the LCS, and is currently still one of the best that we have seen.
Yeah, and the glaring blemish on his resume is, of course, just watch the opening teaser for 2017 Worlds, saying he says himself, I have to do something internationally if I want to prove myself as one of the best. And of course, that was the year they had the Group of Life and completely blew it. Did that 2017 TSM roster. But the international success, or more so failures, that Bjergsen has had, hasn't made it out of groups at MSI, only made it out of groups at Worlds once in 2014. And the sheer level of dominance that he's had in North America is still enough for him to be number 2 on this list, despite some of those international failures.
If you want to be talking about international failures and recent failures for Bjergsen, sure, you can have those type of conversations, and you can talk about not exactly being the same type of dominant player as he was before, the way that he would, always be able to hold lane and get these advantages elsewhere. The game has changed and evolved so much that that's not exactly playing into his favor, but you cannot deny the accomplishments that he's put together with TSM and the impact that he still has in the scene as a figure. This is gotta be our number 2 player in the LCS. And
it's not like there's no player. Find me any player in North America where you could say, yeah, absolutely perfect international record. They need to be number 1 because they've always delivered on the international stage. Maybe the only one you could talk about is Core JJ, but most of those performances weren't in North America. So
I mean, the only NA member doing well internationally has got to be Reddit members, because they're the only ones that seem to find success, because it's definitely not our League of Legends teams.
That's because you just become EU fans once NA is out. So
there you go. 200 IQ.
Back-to-back finals appearances for the Reddit fan base of the West.
But boy.
That's why even with disappointments internationally, there's no player that you can kind of say is scot-free. We even talked about Jensen and Sneaky, who are 2 guys who have stepped up when it comes to the international stage, but they themselves have still had some performances on the big stage that left you, that doesn't look so pretty. That looks more like North America. Thumbs up, guys.
Hey, and look, outside of 2017, and when you're looking at previous years, I don't know how much more you could have wanted necessarily from Bjergsen. You're looking at 2016.
He was great. 2016.
He had a really bad Zillion game against Samsung, and outside of that, he was fantastic for them during that run. And even if you keep going back further, well, how much more do you want to put on his shoulders at that point in his career on that team? I don't know if that's exactly fair. So sure, you can talk about 2017 being a failure, one bad performance in the 2016 run, but outside of that, I think that this narrative gets blown out a bit out of proportion.
And a lot of these international disappointments, it's not a single player, it's that entire team, because all of TSM in 2017... How's he supposed to keep Doublelift away from Victor? Come on. Maybe that was his call. Doublelift, go kill Victor? Go solo him? E into Victor? Okay. Yeah, that's the secret. Of course, that alludes to who number 1 on our list is. It's his new teammate renewed. It is Doublelift. Maybe the pre-Team Liquid era, you would absolutely be talking about Bjergsen as number 1 on this list. But when Doublelift wins 4 splits in a row, gets an MVP thrown in there, and you combine that with the fact, even on the CLG days when he was still the best AD carry in North America, even though they weren't winning, he's got longevity, peak performance, and now he even has sprinkled in a little bit of international success when you talk about the 2019 MSI finals. Doublelift, clear cut for me, is number 1 on this list. He is the king of North American League of Legends. He is the most accomplished player. He is the most popular player. This is Doublelift's list to sit at the very top and look down from. Number 1 in North America, number 1 at this list. Doublelift has done so much in his career for this region. And yes, as you talked about it, there is some international success. And we're talking about this, and yes, international success is maybe still in quotation marks, because
not enough of it.
It's
given how
it's a 1 to 5 ratio, basically. One success, 4 or 5
not
failures.
Enough of that international success, given the domestic success that we've seen. But that is something that, look, if you want to levy that criticism at Doublelift, you got to be putting it at the entirety of the North American region. That can't hold him back. Got to be putting him at our #1 spot.
Yeah, and like Bjergsen, if you dissect some of these Worlds and MSI performances, 2019 they get to the finals. 2018, you're not putting any of that run at MSI on Doublelift. Even 2019 Worlds, I think Doublelift was fine for the most part. 2017, okay, yep, you take a lot of the blame for that one. But 2016, if you remove dashing into Crown's Victor, they were winning the laning phase against Ruler and Core JJ before that. They're going up against Ruler and Uzi in bot lanes in that group, and Bio and Doublelift were absolutely holding their own in a lot of those matchups. So it's really just that one moment that, of course, cost you the game, potentially getting you out of groups entirely. But other than that, performed well.
The problem for the TSM organization seems to be that it's just that one moment that is the downfall, and the problem is that they string one moment after one moment after one moment after one moment, and it ends up in that failure. But that's a different story. Come on, this is positive time, talking about our top 5 in the LCS, and we are talking about the successes of Doublelift, the accomplishments he's made. You said it right. He had these accomplishments, the longevity in his career already at the beginning with CLG. We all know about the dominance and the success that he had with TSM. And then after that, where the path differentiates from Bjergsen, this is where he separates himself as the #1 player in our region, continuing that success, continuing that absolute peak dominance from not only his position, but across the entirety of the LCS. There's no way about it to put anyone else at the very top other than Doublelift.
Yeah, and Bjergsen, Doublelift, obviously the clear 1-2, and listen, Jensen and Xmithy, number 4 and 3 on the same team. Great. We should have international success as North America. Doublelift, Bjergsen, 1 and 2 on this list. Wow, they must have imagined what they would do on a team together. They wouldn't get out of groups. Maybe it's different in a new era, but if North America is putting together basically the best teams they possibly can and still failing internationally, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about those guys.
I think that says we got other issues with our region going on here as well.
There's a lot of issues going on in North America. In the future, a guy who might sneak onto this list, maybe Licorice on Cloud9, somebody that you could be talking about. He needs more in his career, but he could eventually get on this list, maybe.
This is certainly a list that when you look at some of the young names coming up, there's nothing stopping them from leapfrogging a couple of these players, put together a couple of accomplishments here. That's all it's got to be. It's about, you're looking at a couple of these guys, sure, they've had big performances, big players in the history of our region, but they're certainly not immune to being passed on this list, given the that level of play that we have seen from some of our young guns. You're talking about Licorice. Man, couple more splits of this, get Blabber up on that list for me.
Yeah, Blabber, still very early. You need the longevity to really crack here, unless Cloud9's making noise and going on deep runs in the World Championship. And who knows? They dominated North America. That is all the time today for League Unlocked. Mark and Eric here with you guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you on the flippity flop.